General John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, Prince of Mindelheim, KG, PC, was an English soldier and statesman whose career spanned the reigns of 5 monarchs. Rising from a lowly page at the court of the House of Stuart, he served James, Duke of York, through the 1670s and early 1680s, earning military and political advancement through his courage and diplomatic skill. Churchill's role in defeating the Monmouth Rebellion in 1685 helped secure James on the throne, yet just 3 years later he abandoned his Catholic patron for the Protestant Dutchman, William of Orange, honoured for his services at William's coronation with the earldom of Marlborough. He served with further distinction in the early years of the 9 Years' War, but persistent charges of Jacobitism brought about his fall from office and temporary imprisonment in the Tower. It was not until the accession of Queen Anne in 1702 that Marlborough reached the zenith of his powers and secured his fame and fortune. His marriage to the hot-tempered Sarah Jennings, Anne's intimate friend, ensured Marlborough's rise, first to the Captain Generalcy of British forces, then to a dukedom, becoming de facto leader of Allied forces during the War of the Spanish Succession. His victories on the fields of Blenheim, Ramillies, Oudenarde, and Malplaquet ensured his place in history as one of Europe's great generals. But his wife's stormy relationship with the Queen and her subsequent dismissal from court was central to his own fall, incurring Anne's disfavour and caught between Tory and Whig factions. Marlborough, who had brought glory and success to Anne's reign, was forced from office and went into self-imposed exile. He returned to England and to influence under the House of Hanover with the accession of George I to the British throne in 1714. Marlborough's insatiable ambition made him the richest of all Anne's subjects. His family connections wove him into the fabric of European politics. His leadership of the Allied armies consolidated Britain's emergence as a front-rank power. He successfully maintained unity among the Allies, thereby demonstrating his diplomatic skills. Throughout 10 consecutive campaigns during the Spanish Succession War, Marlborough held together a discordant coalition through his sheer force of personality and raised the standing of British arms to a level not known since the Middle Ages. Although in the end he could not compel total capitulation from his enemies, his victories allowed Britain to rise from a minor to a major power, ensuring the country's growing prosperity throughout the 18th century. Early life. Origins. Churchill was the son of Sir Winston Churchill of Glanville's Wootton in Dorset, by his wife Elizabeth Drake, 4th daughter of Sir John Drake of Ashe in the parish of Musbury in Devon. The Churchill family, as stated by the Devon historian William George Hoskins, to have originated at the estate of Churchill, in the parish of Broadclyst in Devon, during the reign of King Henry II. Ashe House. At the end of the English Civil War, Lady Drake was joined at her Devon home, Ashe House in the parish of Musbury, by her 4th daughter Elizabeth Drake and her husband Winston Churchill, a Royalist cavalry captain. Unlike his mother-in-law, who had supported the parliamentary cause, Winston had the misfortune of fighting on the losing side of the war, for which he, like so many other cavaliers, was forced to compound, in his case £446.18. Although Winston had paid off the fine by 1651, it had impoverished him. For this episode may derive the Churchill family motto, Fil pero desdichado. Siblings. Winston Churchill and his wife Elizabeth Drake had at least 9 children, only 5 of whom survived infancy. The eldest daughter, Arabella Churchill, was born on the 28th of February 1649. John Churchill, the eldest son, was born on the 26th of May 1650. The 2 younger sons were George Churchill, an admiral in the Royal Navy, and Charles Churchill, a general who served on campaign in Europe with his eldest brother John. Childhood. Little is known of John Churchill's childhood, about which he left no written description, but growing up in these impoverished conditions at Ash, with family tensions soured by conflicting allegiances, may have made a lasting impression on the young Churchill. His descendant and biographer, the Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill, asserted that the conditions at Ash might well have aroused in his mind two prevailing impressions: first, a hatred of poverty, and secondly, the need of hiding thoughts and feelings from those to whom their expression would be repugnant. Youth and education. After the restoration of King Charles II in 1660, his father's fortunes took a turn for the better, although he remained far from prosperous. In 1661, Winston became Member of Parliament for Weymouth, and as a mark of royal favour he received rewards for losses incurred fighting against the parliamentarians during the Civil War, including the appointment as a Commissioner for Irish land claims in Dublin in 1661. When Winston departed for Ireland the following year, John enrolled at the Dublin Free School, but by 1664, following his father's recall to the position of junior clerk controller of the King's household at Whitehall, John had transferred his studies to St Paul's School in London. The King's own penury meant the old Cavaliers received scant financial reward, but the prodigal monarch could offer something which would cost him nothing: positions at court for their progeny. Thus in 1665 Arabella became maid of honour to Anne Hyde, the Duchess of York. Some months later Arabella's brother John joined her at court, serving as page to Anne's husband, James, Duke of York, the brother of the king. Career. Early military experience. The Duke of York's passion for all things naval and military rubbed off on young Churchill, often accompanying the Duke inspecting the troops in the royal parks. It was not long before the boy had set his heart on becoming a soldier himself. On the 14th of September 1667, he obtained a commission as ensign in the King's Own Company in the 1st Guards, later to become the Grenadier Guards. Many of Marlborough's hagiographers, following Ledyard's panegyric, credit him with service in the North African outpost of Tangier, recently acquired as part of the dowry of Charles II's Portuguese wife, Catherine of Braganza. That is unlikely, and even Sir Winston S. Churchill says there is, indeed, no contemporary evidence of his ever having been there. The known facts are that he was commissioned ensign in September 1667. On the 21st of February 1670, the 1st Guards and the Coldstream Guards were ordered each to provide 50 musketeers, a corporal, a sergeant and a commissioned officer for service with Sir Thomas Allen's Mediterranean fleet. In March 1670, there is an order of the King to provide money owed to Churchill's father, Sir Winston, to cover John Churchill's equipage and other expenses in ye employment he is now forthwith by our command to undertake on board ye fleet in ye Mediterranean seas. Sir Edward Spragg sailed early in 1670 to the Mediterranean, where he joined Sir Thomas Allen. By February 1671, John Churchill was back in London and duelling with Sir John Fenwick. Back in London by February 1671, Churchill's handsome features and manner, described by Lord Chesterfield as irresistible to either man or woman, had soon attracted the ravenous attentions of one of the King's most noteworthy mistresses, Barbara Villiers, Duchess of Cleveland. But his liaisons with the insatiable temptress were indeed dangerous. One account has it that upon the King's appearance Churchill leapt out of his lover's bed and hid in the cupboard, but the King, himself wily in such matters, soon discovered young Churchill, who promptly fell to his knees. "You are a rascal," said Charles, "but I forgive you because you do it to get your bread." The story may be apocryphal, yet it is widely accepted that he was the father of Cleveland's daughter, Barbara, born on the 16th of July 1672. In 1672 Churchill was posted to sea again, and fought against the Dutch navy at the Battle of Solebay on the 28th of May, possibly aboard the Duke of York's flagship, the Prince, which was crippled in the action. Shortly thereafter, Churchill was promoted to a captaincy in the Duke of York's Admiralty Regiment. The following year Churchill gained a commendation at the Siege of Maastricht when the young captain distinguished himself as part of the 30-man Forlorn Hope, successfully capturing and defending part of the fortress. During this incident Churchill is credited with saving the Duke of Monmouth's life, receiving a slight wound in the process but gaining further praise from a grateful House of Stuart, as well as recognition from the House of Bourbon. King Louis XIV in person commended the deed, from which time forward bore Churchill an enviable reputation for physical courage, as well as earning the high regard of the common soldier. Although Charles II's anti-French Parliament had forced England to withdraw from the Franco-Dutch War in 1674, some English regiments remained in French service. In April Churchill was appointed the colonelcy of one such regiment, thereafter serving with, and learning from, the great Marshal Turenne. Churchill was present at the hard-fought battles of Sinsheim in June 1674, and Enzim in October. He may also have been present at Salzburg in July 1675, where Turenne was killed. Marriage and family. On his return to St. James's Palace, Churchill's attention was drawn towards other matters, and to a fresh face at court. "I beg you will let me see you as often as you can," pleaded Churchill in a letter to Sarah Jennings, "which I am sure you ought to do if you care for my love." Sarah Jennings' social origins were in many ways similar to Churchill's. Minor gentry blighted by debt-induced poverty. After her father's death when she was 8, Sarah, together with her mother and sisters, moved to London. As royalist supporters, the Jennings' loyalty to the crown, like the Churchills', was repaid with court employment, and in 1673 Sarah followed her sister Frances into the household of the Duchess of York, Mary of Modena, second wife to James, Duke of York. Sarah was about 15 when Churchill returned from the continent in 1675, and he appears to have been almost immediately captivated by her charms and considerable good looks. Churchill's amorous, almost abject, missives of devotion were, it seems, received with suspicion. His first lover, Barbara Villiers, was just moving her household to Paris, feeding doubts that he may well have been looking at Sarah as a replacement mistress rather than a fiancée. However, his persistent courtship over the coming months eventually won over the beautiful, if relatively poor, maid of honor. Although Winston wished his son to marry the wealthy Catherine Sedley, Colonel Churchill married Sarah sometime in the winter of 1677–78, possibly in the apartments of the Duchess of York. John and Sarah had the following children: Lady Harriet Churchill, Henrietta Churchill, 2nd Duchess of Marlborough; Lady Anne Churchill, John Churchill, Marquess of Blandford; Lady Elizabeth Churchill. Lady Mary Churchill became Duchess of Montagu by marriage to the 2nd Duke, Lord Charles Churchill.